In the year 1787, our Constitution came into being. And 11 years after the Declaration of Independence and 5 years after the Revolutionary War. The colonies or states' constitutions were the form of government for 11 years. The Articles of Confederation was the American government, but it was only a skeleton of what we needed. There were many people who helped with the Constitution, but there was only one man who wrote the preamble to the Constitution, and that was Gouverneur Morris. It's spelled different. It's not Governor Morris, it's Gouverneur Morris. His first name was Gouverneur. And he was a representative for his colony at the Continental Conventions. He was a gifted penman and lawyer. He was a wealthy bachelor. He was 36 years old when he wrote the preamble. He had lost his leg in an accident, but it didn't embarrass him in the least. He was said to have thumped his wooden leg on the floor when he approved his speeches. My friends, he was the author of the preamble of the Constitution. Morris incorporated everything important and nothing superficial. So, I'm going to show you a picture of the Constitution, and we are going to read through it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Oh, we want that down. We'll look at that one in a minute. Okay. It starts off with we the people, and that is profound and important. This recognizes the inalienable rights of the people of America to govern themselves. John Locke is stated, "There is no such thing as the right of kings to rule over men." Thomas Jefferson said, "If we think the people not enlightened enough to exercise their control over with good discretion over the Constitution, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to educate them. This is the true correction of the abuse of the constitutional power." Novel idea. Educate the people as to how they came up with the ideas for all the things that are in the Constitution. Don't take those rights away from them, thinking you know better, so you will make all the decisions. The Constitution was not a mandate. It was not forced on the people. It was submitted by a delegate of representatives from the Continental Congress, and it was taken to every state, and it was voted on. When the people accepted it, then it was ratified. This spurred the writings of the Federalist Papers that was started with John Jay in New York. It was a series of newspaper articles which were written to help the people understand and support the Constitution. The people of New York were the ones most likely to reject it. The delegates from the Constitutional Convention debated for months on the ideas and the verbiage to be used, and they knew the people would feel the same and would want to be educated as to how the Constitution was developed. So the Federalist Papers came about to help the people of New York understand this. And it spread throughout the United States, and everybody read the Federalist Papers at the time, and it helped with them deciding that they would ratify the Constitution. The United States Constitution was ratified by the people, all 13 colonies. We, the people, is significant. Now let's look at the 6 goals that was in the preamble. The first one is, in order to form a more perfect union, there is a need for a union. Think of the analogy of a rope. If you take one strand of string, you can break it. But if you take 13 strands of string, such as the 13 colonies, you weave them together, you twist them, and you make them into a rope, then it's harder to break. So, the idea of being unified brings strength. Together, the colonies were a formidable force, and the European countries would recognize them as such and stop trying to control them. They had proven this with the Revolutionary War. The British soldiers were fighting for the king. They didn't have the same motivator as the Americans. The Americans were fighting for family, home, liberty, and freedoms and rights. The Americans, united with the same cause, became powerful. 13 states of people were very gun-shy towards kingship and tyranny-led government, and was not going to give up their rights that they had just fought for. So to unite them was a monumental achievement. In the Federalist Papers, James Madison was quoted as saying, "We will be a more forbidding posture to foreign ambitions than a disunified handful of troops. United, we are 100,000 veterans ready for combat, but never let it for a moment be forgotten that the states are indebted to the disadvantage from the Union alone. The moment it is dissolved will be the date of a new order of things. It will crush liberty between standing armies and increase taxes to support individual states. The picture of a disunion cannot be too highly colored with problems. Every man who loves peace, every man who loves their country, every man who loves liberty ought to have it forever before their eyes, that he may cherish in his heart the due attachment to the Union of America." And then John Adams said, "The distinction between Virginians, New Yorkers, and New Englanders are no more. I am an American." All this could have been said in the preamble, but Morris tailored it down to one concise statement: in order to form a more perfect union. Okay, number 2 in the preamble was establish justice. The Constitution was written to give equal justice to all. It was written with the right of every citizen to be protected in his life and his liberty and treated innocent until proven guilty. Cleon Skousen said, "When the government protects the rights of the people and provides an adequate remedy for those whose rights have been violated, then the government is providing equal justice for all. Justice offers a speedy trial and an opportunity to repair the wrong if found guilty. An enlarged union safeguards the people from injustice and abuse." End quote. Constitutional rights for a higher law, such as the Supreme Court on federal levels, keeps the state courts from becoming corrupt. I have a story I'd like to tell you about me when I was 4 or 5 years old, right in between there. I was my father's shadow for a while. I loved doing the fun things that he was doing, and he let me help with his chores of feeding and watering the animals every once in a while. But when I went out with my dad, I had to follow the rules. One rule was we always closed the fence and the pens if we opened it. And we always fed the animals on time. And we always did not walk behind old Betsy, our cow. And the fourth rule really was my mother's rule. It was clean off your shoes on the back porch before you come in. Now, our old cow named Betsy gave us a lot of milk, but she was ornery and stubborn. I knew that my dad kept her around because she gave such good milk. And I knew that these rules that my father had set were carved in stone like the Ten Commandments. And even though I had a sure knowledge of these rules, I understood them, I broke one of them. I walked behind old Betsy. Dad was milking her at the time, and she kicked me so hard that I flew about 6 feet into the muck in the pen. Old Betsy kicked the milk bucket over as Dad stood up to run to me to see how I was. I was bruised on my belly with the hoof print, and I had cracked one of my ribs, and it hurt when I laughed and coughed for a while. All my life I've had a scar of that hoof. My mother called it my disobedience mark, and she said, "Laws and commandments are to protect us so we don't get kicked." As I got older, I realized the significance of that statement. Justice can only be carried out if laws are in place, such as my father's rules about not stepping behind the cow. The choice I made had consequences, and I paid for my disobedience. When someone undertakes to administer justice, the rule must be equal for all. My father's rule was the same for everyone, including himself. I really couldn't be mad at the cow. It was just my fault for breaking the rules. Courts and judges have to administer equal and exact justice for all men. Number 3 in the preamble is ensure domestic tranquility. This means people's rights to have a state of law and order so they can feel secure and at peace. This is done by states mainly, but the states can call upon the federal government for help if they can't handle a problem. Our home should be a place of peace and security. All families have this protection under the Constitution. This is why the police intervene in homes when family members do not feel secure in their own home. If the national government gets involved in state problems, like after a hurricane or floods, and some people are looting and robbing, and there's just total chaos, states are grateful for the help. But there is a provision in the Constitution to keep the federal government from becoming overbearing. 2/3 of the states can reform the federal aggression to preserve the state's government rights. The word tranquility means peaceful and stable. The Constitution makes sure that people feel peaceful, safe, and stable. I was 11 years old, and my younger sister was 9. And my brother was babysitting us, and he was left in charge. He was assigned to be the babysitter, but he wanted to go to the store to go see a girl, so he left us alone. It was a dark, overcast fall evening, and an unusual pounding at the door scared me to death. The first one at the door was my sister. She unlocked the door and pulled it wide open, and then opened the screen door. I was just close behind her, and I got the feeling something was terribly wrong. The man outside was yelling, "Let me in!" And that was a dead giveaway. To me, he was trouble. I had to make an instant decision: let the man in and shut my sister out with him, or what was I going to do? I opted to shut the door. I ran at the door as hard as I could, my sister was shoved onto the porch in the blink of an eye with an obviously drunk man. I locked the door with a deadbolt, sunk to the floor with my back to the door. My mind was racing of a way to save my sister and get help. While I was desperately trying to make this decision, my sister was on the other side of the door yelling, "This isn't funny. Open that door and let us in." At which the drunk chimed in with her, "Yeah, kid, let us in." I crawled to the phone in the living room, and I crawled across the floor because we had big bay windows next to the door. And so I didn't want them to see me. I dialed the neighbor's number and whispered in a sobbing voice. I cried for help. I alarmed the neighbor, and she acted, and she said she would send her husband right away. I may have been a gutsy kid, but even I knew when I needed to yell for help. I had barely hung up when I heard my sister at the back door, and she was turning the doorknob. All my senses were on alert, and I flung myself to the back door. She was there, but the drunk had not quite got there. He was a little slower. I grabbed my sister and pulled her inside and locked the back door. She had come to the realization then that this man was not somebody to hang out with on the porch. She was awfully glad to be back inside with the door locked behind her. We crawled to the laundry room and hung to each other in the dark. To us, it seemed like we were there forever. Then the pounding started again, and my sister started to cry. I was shaking in my boots, too, and then I heard someone yell, "Why'd you lock the door? Come on, you guys, let me in before Dad and Mom get home." It was my brother. We fled to the back door and let our beloved protector in. He tried to make sense of our story amid the sobs and the gasps for air. Our brother didn't believe us until the doorbell rang, and it was our neighbor announcing that he had taken the drunk home and wanted to know if we were all right. My brother thanked him, and then he went home. My brother sat on the sofa and his head in his hands, saying, "I was just gone 20 minutes, only 20 minutes. I can't believe all this happened. Oh boy, I'm going to be in so much trouble." And he was right. When my parents got home, they were not happy with him leaving. However, they were grateful I had slammed the door and kept bad things outside our home. Home should always be a safe haven. Never bring bad things to your home. Well, just as I use my power to lock out bad things from our home, the government has the right to lock out bad things from your home, too. It has the right to lock out drug dealers and mobs and things like that from our states, cities, neighborhoods, and homes. And this is their right because they are, ensuring domestic tranquility. Number 4 is provide for the common defense. This means to fight against the enemies inside and outside our country that want to harm us. The Constitution is to protect all citizens from warring nations that use 2 forms of aggression. One form is an internal and one is an external. The founders were really animate about their commitment to states and with military strength. George Washington said, "To be prepared for war is one of the effective means of preserving peace." After the problem they'd had with the Union supplying for the soldiers during the Revolutionary War, the founder put a lot of common defense in the Constitution. I was a young girl when the the crisis with Cuba happened. And my brother-in-law was called on call with the Utah National Guard to go to Florida to protect the people there from an invasion that was threatening to happen. Some states had already sent soldiers to Florida. Cuba isn't far from Florida. Here's Florida, and here's the island of Cuba. There's only 90 miles between them here. Cuba was being supported by Russia, and we were in a we were in a Cold War with Russia at the time, and um, and Russia was supplying them with all kinds of rocket launchers, and they were being highly weaponized and only 90 miles from our border. I remember this was in the 1950s. It was a sensitive time for my family, full of nervousness and being scared. So I have seen common defense provided for on our shores myself, and it's a good thing. I can't bring back to my memory another time when we've had that kind of an aggression so close to our shores. We've never had to fight off a foreign country since the Civil War, since the Revolutionary War. And this was a close call. It's a good thing to have providing for the common defense. And number 5 for the preamble was promote the general welfare. This meant the Americans had the right to have the government serve the welfare of its people in their collective needs. This is a general welfare, not to use resources of the federal government to benefit certain people or specific regions or estates. The welfare cause was designed as a restriction of power, not to grant power. Congress could not do anything they felt like with the funds for the welfare of specific people or regions. When states have had floods, fires, and drought, the federal government have to have had a percentage of the votes of Congress to provide federal funding to help these areas in America. It also has to have their approval of one other of the branches of the government, such as the president. This is usually the case, as the president and Congress make the two agreements from the two heads of government. This is the usual scenario, and we've all seen many times on the news a picture of the president flying over a disaster of some kind, from a hurricane or a flooded area. And this is so he can make an educated assessment of the situation and okay the legislative decision to allocate funds for relief. Even though there are regulations, it is still wonderful support for the state to know that the federal government has their backs. Long ago, in the 1800s, Davy Crockett was a representative for Kentucky. And he stood up and gave a famous speech in Congress. They were trying to pass a bill at the time to send federal funding to help a widow of a general that had fought in the army, that had been such a good man and had given so much of his life in defense of freedom for people. And they thought it was a kind and wonderful thing that they could do for this widow and pay off her mortgage and help her get more self-sufficient. And Davy Crockett agreed with him. Something needed to be done. But he had read the Constitution, and he knew that they were not supposed to spend federal government for specific people. And so he stood up in Congress and he told them, I will not sign this bill. This is against the Constitution. He told them why. And then he said, this is for individual people to help. And I agree, she should be helped. And so I have $20 in my hand, and I will be the first to pledge it to a fund to help this woman. And there's many of you that are more wealthy than I am that can pledge money, and we can take care of this situation if we feel like it's needed ourselves and start a fund for her. But we will not be spending the government's money, the federal money. This man knew his Constitution, and he knew that the regulations needed to be upheld. And this is the way that the laws work back in Washington, D.C. for our benefit. And then number 6 for the preamble was secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. This is the right of all Americans to have our government protect the freedoms of the people from one generation to another. The founders had much to say on how easily liberties can be lost. Samuel Adams said, "He is the truest friend of liberty of his country, who tries to promote its virtue, and who, so far as power and influence extend, will not suffer a man to be chosen to any office of power, and trust who is not a wise man." Elections are important. Alex de Tocqueville was a Frenchman who came to America in 1831 to observe how the American government was working for us. He was on a fact-finding mission for the French after their revolution. He wrote the book Democracy in America, where he had high praises for our people, especially the children. He was astonished by the knowledge the children had of the Constitution and how America was operating. He said many were reading from a little book of questions and answers called the Catechism of the Constitution. And I have a copy of it right here. We will hear some quotes from it soon. The Catechism of the Constitution. It was written by Arthur J. Stansbury. It's an excellent little book about the Constitution. He said many were reading from this little book. And the Americans back then made sure their children knew the Constitution and would stand up for their rights. This has perpetuated to today to our high schools, where before you can graduate from high school, you have to have taken a government class. However, there is a lot lacking in this regard. Our children are not being taught much about the Constitution. If you ask a high school senior what the Constitution is, what's in the Constitution today, you may get the answer like I did. Oh, it's about gun rights and stuff like that. How can we expect to preserve the priceless document if we don't even know what it says? We do have the blessings of liberty. We do want this for our posterity also. The preamble is worth memorizing. A good way to do this is learn the Animaniacs preamble song. Yes, I did say Animaniacs. Become familiar with the Constitution is my endeavor right now. I hope I am making this information clear and instilling fire for freedom in others' hearts. And may God be with you till we meet again.